Have you ever thought why we still have only 5 preservation characters? And not to mention 2 of them are free, when Honkai Star Rail has been out for over a year. Meanwhile, we keep getting Harmony or Nihility characters every other patch? Well, the answer is very easy. The developers hate designing them. Just kidding. I tried to think hard why that is the case, and I have concluded that, based on my observation, it has to be related to one of the most fundamental problems of gacha game design: power creeping. From my observation is that I feel the developers really wants to make each of the characters have unique gameplay, only that character able to do. And even if they have something similar, the developers tend to not disrupt the power balance too much. The perfect example would be Jiao Chu. They scrap the whole Nihility healer things and focus more towards debuffing, because I think they don't want to take away the role of healing from the Abundance unit. And instead of replacing Pella, he is great to be paired up with Pella. Or even Yun Li, a character that has similar function with Clara and does more than Clara, but instead of replacing Clara, you might want to put Clara together with her. So even though it feels like they make a character with similar kit from previous character, they don't want you to exactly replace them. And from game design perspective, it is a good thing as well, because you don't want the old characters to become obsolete, and it opens up options for the players. You can always go with the most optimal thing, or you can play around with whichever team that feels fun to you. Back to preservation. This particular path is really prone to power creep. Just also to add, this particular problem can also apply to Abundance due to their similar nature. Because how combat is designed with sustain unit divided into 2 different paths, each of them are locked into their respective role, with Abundance revolved around recovering health and preservation revolving around tanking. Unlike DPS that have many ways to deal damage to the enemies, the way you can heal or tank your teammate is very limited, since all you care about is not to have your characters die. With tanking, currently there are only 2 ways that exist in the game. The first one are the shielders, which are done by March, Gepard, Trailblazer, and Aventurine. And the other method is through damage reduction and damage absorption, which is done by xuan. There are many ways you can apply shield. At the moment, it's either being done through skills or ultimate. But if the developers want to, they can just add more by having a summon that gives shields every few turns, or the talent that triggers every time you get hit, you start giving shields or something. But even with that very simple solution, the developers still don't release that many preservation units, because most likely players would only choose whichever is the most efficient for them. And that is just straight up power creeping, and doesn't really distinguish the uniqueness between each characters. Maybe except just tiny bit depending on how the shield is given. So unless we come up with a new way of tanking, any of the characters that Hoyoverse produce is most likely just gonna straight up power creeping or end up underperforming, or we end up with the most recent case of getting a hybrid unit, either a hybrid support or a hybrid DPS. And once again, this case generally applies for Abundance character as well, as I've explained that in details in my video, the problem with Abundance character. So if you'd like to know about it, it should be accessible by clicking on the top right at this moment. And I will also add them in the description if you're interested to watch it later. But I digress. So how can we make a new preservation unit? This question needs to be answered sooner or later, because Honkai Star Rail is a live service game that sells characters. Eventually, the developers are forced to make more preservation and Abundance characters. With the next one, probably Lingsha is gonna be the next Abundance unit. So I want to contribute a little bit to the game by adding my own ideas. As of now, I have 2 different ideas on how they can make a unique preservation unit, which are the following. Oh, by the way, also add your idea in the comment section. Maybe the devs could pick it up and it becomes reality one day. Anyway, this is my idea. The first one, a preservation that focuses on damage reflection. He can just be a normal guy that has a lot of defense and a very high aggro. But what he does, he will convert all the damage he takes and reflect them back into the enemies. And once they reflect the damage, maybe even generate some shields depending on how much damage he absorbs. Or maybe he heals himself, maybe by recovering his health up to maybe 50% of damage taken by him after the reflection is done. That way, the character is not immortal, and he can die eventually. The concept is still tanking, but it is done differently from how Gepard in Xuan operates. It is all about him wanting to get hit and then reflect the damage to the enemy, and through that damage that they got, they help others by giving shields or healing. Or maybe if you don't want him to be a DPS, instead of the reflection deals a lot of damage to the enemy, it can be a lot of toughness damage instead. So like a super break sustain. It is just an idea. This character is still tanking, but operates very differently. And my second idea is by using the concepts of self-revival, like a zombie or vampire character or something. The idea is literally just being a sandbag. That's all they just do. They tank, they die, they revive. So the gimmick, they can resuscitate themselves. But to make it more balanced, it has a long cooldown or take a bit time for them to revive. To do a proper job in tanking, they can have the ability to taunt all enemies to make sure your teammates are not attacked. But once they die, your teammates are vulnerable for few turns, if the developers decided to take a few turns for the characters to revive themselves. But if it has a long cooldown, they can just make the character will give shield or healing the moment the character dies. This idea of mine comes from FGO, at which with some right setup, you can have characters to keep reviving themselves. So these are my two ideas. It is a very weird take, but you can see that it is very different on how the current preservation unit operates. So these two ideas are actually a riskier way to play and might not be everyone's cups of tea. But it really opens up different playstyle for some people like me who enjoys this high risk, high reward gameplay. I gotta admit though, Hoyoverse is a company and they want to make money, and for most casuals probably aventurine is a more appealing option because it's safer. So I would suggest implement this idea to be used on a 4-star character instead. So what are your ideas? Let me know in the comment section once again. Alright, that's all I want to yap about for this video. If you like what you hear, do leave a like and subscribe to my channel. I make a discussion content much like this one very often, so that I could have more insight on how the players are feeling towards the video games that they play. Until the next video, stay sharp gamers.
Oh, and don't forget to like and subscribe!